And now that the podcast is up, I'm getting stories that good stories too, that I didn't even remember. But
what about this guy, John Gotti? How did you
John
meet?
Gotti.
How
Well,
did you
John
meet him?
Gotti, John Gotti, I met when we were kids. When I first quit school, I didn't quit. They threw me out as soon as I got sick, became 16. They threw me out. My mother, for punishment, she says, "You want to be a tough guy? You want to be a wise guy?" She put me with my Uncle Pepe. My Uncle Pepe ran the piers on West Street in Manhattan. And they suited me up with a pea cap and a pea coat and a hook on my shoulder. I had to be down on West Street at 5:30 in the morning, and I stood very much like that picture on the waterfront. So if you saw that, or if you remember that, that describes it pretty well. 30, 40, 50 guys on the corner, my Uncle Pepe on the platform there, yelling who's going to work that day and who's not. So they told me just keep my collar up. I was 16 years old. And he picked me about the 30th guy. They put me down in the hold of a ship, and that was no problem. I worked, and my uncle says, don't talk to nobody, just do your work, and that's what I did. The only problem with that job, I was making good money. I was making more money than my father was making driving a cab. And
Yeah.
but every Friday when you got paid, there was a crap game. So you automatically got your paycheck. You gave it to the mob guy in the corner that cashed it for $10 or whatever it was. And you went into the crap game, and within a half hour you were broke, and you go home and your mother beats the shit out of you again for losing your pay. That happened about 3 weeks in a row. And she went to my uncle. She says, can't you stop him? And he says, look, I control 100 guys. I can't be babysitting him. So anyway, she pulled me out of there, and she put me with my cousin, Pete Graffia, who was the boss of a trucking company in Maspeth, Queens called, I think it was Mid-State Spectre. And as punishment, he put me on the night shift as the gas man for the tractors. And the only one that was there at that time was, I think his name was John Caputo. I'm not sure, but he was the switcher. And the switcher is the guy who separates the trailers from the tractors and parks them, and then separates the tractor, brings it to the gas pump, and I gas it up and fix whatever flats they might have. But John Caputo was a terrible heroin addict, and he needed lots of money. And it was something kind of new to me because I used to rob gas stations. And all of a sudden, I found out that he was robbing freight and everything. And I started doing that too. And I had a big Lincoln at the time with a big trunk, and I was able to put one of them big trailer truck tires into the trunk, one in the back seat. And I had a garage where I lived in Jackson Heights. I rented for, I think, $5 or $10 a month, where I put my stock car. And I parked the stock car outside. I covered it up with a tarp, and I filled that whole garage up with tires. And then one day, well, with the tires, naturally you're looking for, and all the other stuff that we were robbing together, I was looking for a fence where somebody that I could sell it to. And I ran across John Gotti, because all the thieves know all the thieves. And Gotti at the time was 60. He was the same age as me. And he had many connections. He was part of a crew where he lived in not far from Jackson Heights. I think it was up past Corona, Rego Park, or whatever that area was. And he had a lot of outs. And he was able to get rid of all these big trail truck tires. He knew people that owned garbage trucks and stuff, and he got rid of them. We whacked up the money. And then one day my cousin calls me, and he tells me that there's 3 trail loads of Cutty Sark whiskey coming in. He says, tell John to back the trailers into the hold'em yard. They were going to stay here for a week or two and gas up the tractors. And that's what I did. So I told John, and John backed them into the hold'em cell. And then we devised a plan to rob him. But I got a hold of John first, and I said, listen, if I get 3 trail loads of Cutty Sark whiskey, there were 1,100 cases in each trail load. They were quart bottles. You have an out for them? And he says he'd find out, but he did. He had a guy that owned a couple of catering halls, and we wind up robbing them and getting him and we whacked up that money too. So I knew John from the time we were kids. And after that incident, I had very little to do with them, because shortly after that, I wind up going with the horses, and I won't get into that whole story, how that happened.
But then you start meeting other gangsters when you.
Well, that happened once I got into the horse business, and I would skip ahead a bunch of years. Skip ahead maybe 6-7 years, and I developed terrible sports betting habit. So between the girls and the cars and being broke and everything, I had to. I got involved with one of Whitey Bulger's guys when I went to Lincoln Downs